Rock and Roller Coaster might be the strangest Disney ride I've ever ridden. I don't think it's necessarily a bad fit at Disney's Hollywood Studios, but it is kind of interesting how it's basically the only ride that embraces the thrill of being a roller coaster. Even something like Incredicoaster, which used to be a ride that embraced the thrill, now it is a themed experience, or at least it is an attempted themed experience. Rock and Roller Coaster has three inversions, which is just crazy for a Disney ride. Even Incredicoaster with the singular loop, it is the only inversion at that resort. But for a single ride to have three inversions, and they're also pretty intense inversions, it's not a simple vertical loop. They're more inversions that you can find at a Six Flags or Cedar Fair park, which is just pretty interesting to me. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. The presentation of this ride is super strange because it's basically themed to a sound stage, but it has a giant guitar in front. So, I mean, that guitar is pretty iconic. There's so many pictures of that thing all over the internet. It also looks pretty cool in person, which is super fun. But the entrance is kind of off to the side, though. And more than likely, from my experience, I've had to wait in quite a few lines for Rock and Roller Coaster. It is pretty popular. And for whatever reason, I feel like the standby line moves slower than other Disney roller coasters, so there is that. I don't know if that has more to do with the standby to Genie Plus / Fast Pass ratio, or if that's a capacity thing. But either way, once you get inside, you'll enter the pre-show room, which is pretty basic for Disney. It's just a video with nothing to really enhance it, so it's just kind of like even Tower of Terror, which is next door, has the lights that shut off, and it's a small screen, so it feels a little more eerie. This is just it's pretty obvious that that the band members are on the screen, so there's nothing really special about it. My experience with Rock and Roller Coaster has been spread out over 3 separate years. I rode once in 2018, twice in 2020, and once in 2021. In 2018, that was before I got on a lot of roller coasters, so this was one of the most intense rides I had been on at one point. It's been pretty interesting to see how my perspective on this ride has shifted over the years. Plus, in 2018, I only had one experience with it, so it was a lot to take in. And of course, I got really lucky in 2018. I got assigned to the front row, and that experience was just something else. In 2020 and 2021, I did not get as lucky. I think I got a whole bunch of middle rows. I think I might have got one ride towards the back, though, so there's that. When you enter the station, it is themed to an alleyway, so that's really cool. That launch section is super cool. It's like pretty iconic, that countdown, and the lighting there is just amazing. And I love how the limo pulls up close to the queue line right before you enter the station. And the station itself is themed to like a parking structure, or the bottom level of a parking structure, so it's so well done. It's really cool. When you take your seats, you're gonna step down and then pull down your over-the-shoulder restraint. These things are pretty bulky, but they haven't been a problem for me for the most part. They're just super thick. Once you dispatch, you turn left and you get to actually experience that iconic launch sequence. In 2018, I was just blown away by this launch in the front row, and in 2020 and 2021, I was less than blown away. I mean, it's solid, it's fun. I think it's better than Flight of Fear's launch, and I compare it to Flight of Fear because that is another indoor launch coaster. I really drew the similarities between those two rides, even though Rock and Roller Coaster is so much more well themed and so much more well done. In terms of layout and actual ride experience from a coaster enthusiast perspective, that's just the ride that I automatically compare it to, for better or worse. At the end of the launch track, you are thrown into a sea serpent roll, which is pretty interesting. These are back-to-back inversions, and they're actually pretty intense, which kind of blew me away, especially on my first ride. Oh my gosh. That floored me. It's definitely the highlight of the ride. It's super cool. And I love how the barrier lights turn on and you whiz right past them right before you pull up into the inversion. It's just super cool. At the tops of the inversions, you get like a very light moment of hang time, which is pretty cool. After that, you curve down and around, and the rest of this layout, with one exception, is pretty generic and kind of boring. Some of these turns and straight sections are just not that interesting. In 2018, I didn't mind it as much because, once again, I was an unexperienced coaster rider, but in later years and more recently, it's been less than impressive, especially because it's not the smoothest ride in the world, so you do have to deal with that. One thing I forgot to mention about the Sea Serpent roll is that the backs of the trains, like the backrest, is kind of strange. It's like plastic with like grooves in it. Some of my rides, it's like pinched me during those tight transitions, especially on the inversions. It's been like hit or miss. Like sometimes I got pinched and sometimes I didn't, which is just so bizarre. I haven't really had to deal with that on any other roller coaster I've been on, so it's just strange. This is kind of a strange ride. But yeah, most of this layout is just turns and straight sections. You will have lighted signs that pop up and you go through them or next to them, which is super cool. It's very well done. And I like how they turn off after you pass them, so it's not a jumbled mess in there. But on some of my rides, the signs turn on too late, so it was just kind of weird having to deal with that. That wasn't a problem all the time, but it was just something I noticed. I don't remember which year it was, but that's something that did happen to me. Really, the only other standout moment of this layout is the corkscrew towards the end of the ride. And that thing is so fun. You get some really nice hang time through it. That, the Sea Serpent roll, and the launch are just really solid moments, and they're really fun. The rest of the layout is just filler. So that's kind of a downside from a coaster enthusiast perspective. From a Disney fan perspective, it is the most well-themed parts of the ride because you can see the signs that light up. But even then, it's not the most impressive effect in the world. So, like, after you pass the first one, it's like, ooh, that one's cool. And then it just kind of keeps happening. And you're like, all right. It's themed to a highway. So, like, seeing just normal freeway signs lit up, it's not the most visually appealing thing. Signs like the Hollywood sign, that is visually appealing. That's really fun. So, it can be kind of hit or miss. The on-ride audio on this attraction could be better. It's not the best in terms of quality compared to other Disney coasters like Space Mountain at Disneyland. I think that one's super well done. Even Incredicoaster, that the quality of that on-ride audio is very, very well maintained. Rock and roller coasters could be better. I do like how some of the songs sync well with the layout. There's one that goes really well with the corkscrew, and that's just such a satisfying moment when that happens. But after that corkscrew, you hit the brake run, which is pretty dark, and then after that you turn right and you enter the exit station, which is themed to the concert because, of course, the whole point of the ride was you're speeding through traffic to get to the concert to use your backstage passes. I love that exit area. It's super well done. Both the load station and the unload station are super well themed, so that's pretty cool. And you can't see that they're connected, which is pretty nice. I'm not sure how far apart they are, but I'm sure it's just like a left turn away or something. So yeah, this layout has 3 standout moments and the rest is kind of bleh. So from that perspective, this ride has dropped in my rankings from a coaster perspective, and from a Disney perspective it wasn't that high to begin with, so it's kind of interesting. This is one of the few Disney rides where I feel like I have to look at it through both lenses of a coaster enthusiast and a Disney fan. And to be honest, it's not great at either. In my opinion, the best Disney rides combine thrills and theming. Rock and Roller Coaster certainly has moments of thrill, but the theming isn't necessarily the greatest. For a ride of this style in a park like Hollywood Studios, it doesn't need to be the most well themed. I mean, it's kind of hard to theme a high-speed roller coaster like this with 3 inversions, so I just think by nature, it's kind of a mixed bag. But it is certainly a standout attraction at Hollywood Studios, and it's one of the most interesting, in my opinion, at least, as a coaster fan. I'm sure some Disney fans might be okay to just skip this ride, but it is just a fascinating ride experience. And that first ride I got in 2018 just absolutely floored me. So for that reason, I feel like this ride was a big stepping stone into becoming such a big coaster enthusiast. I mean, I've always loved roller coasters, but there was a point in time where I only watched videos and watched them in person. I was too scared to actually get on them. So the fact that I loved that ride experience in 2018 probably played a big role in propelling me to where I am today, having ridden over 200 roller coasters. One thing that did benefit Rock and Roller Coaster was my experience riding Flight of Fear at Kings Island and Kings Dominion. Flight of Fear just feels like a knockoff Rock and Roller Coaster. I shouldn't say that because Flight of Fear did open first. So I guess it just feels like a Walmart Rock and Roller Coaster. The stations for both rides are really well done, and at least Disney actually attempted to theme the actual ride experience, while Kings Island and Kings Dominion did not. It's just an empty warehouse with weird alien music playing, like not on the ride vehicle, just like in the show building, which is so weird. Oh my gosh, I do not like rides that do that. Like Space Mountain and Magic Kingdom, that kind of triggers me. It's so weird. Like there's just random generic sci-fi music playing in space. I mean, sure, whatever, knock yourselves out. I will be riding the Space Mountain at Disneyland instead. But from a coaster enthusiast perspective, both rides have a really solid launch. Both rides have pretty solid inversions, but the rest of the layout is just kind of dumb. I would say more of that applies to Flight of Fear because of the mid-course brake runs that actually just slam you to a stop, just like Goliath at Magic Mountain. Like, oh my gosh, man, it's so not cool. And the restraints on Rock and Roller Coaster are so much better than the Flight of Fear restraints. I do not like those at all. They didn't bother me on Mr. Freeze though, which was interesting. I guess maybe that speaks to the quality of that ride experience compared to Flight of Fear. That basically completes my thoughts on Rock and Roller Coaster. It's a very strange ride, but it is definitely a headliner at Hollywood Studios, and it is worth time taking out of your day. But do be warned that those inversions can be pretty intense. If you are not a fan of intensity or going upside down, then stay away. They don't really warn you about the inversions, so it's like the generic spiels of, oh, it's a high-speed roller coaster type ride in the dark, yada yada yada. But you know, they say the same thing about Space Mountain, and that is nowhere near as intense as Rock and Roller Coaster. So yeah, that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you later.